like to welcome you today to our Wellman Seeds and Agri-Solutions plot down here in Tip City, Ohio. We have all of the corn and soybean products that we will be selling for the 21 sales season crop year. And those products are all in this plot, so we're going to go through the plot here and take a look at each of the individual items and tell you a little bit about each one. The first one on the list here is Agri-Solutions 592. It's a 92-day product used predominantly up in Michigan. It's got super early vigor. You can harvest it early, you can plant it early, because when it gets put in the ground in cold, wet soils, it really comes up strong. Seeding rate should be somewhere around 29 to 33,000 per acre, and this particular variety will perform well on all soils. The next hybrid is Key 995. This was a brand new variety in 2020. It's a taller variety and it makes nice big girthy ears. The seeding rate you'll want to use is somewhere in the ballpark of say 29 to 36,000. It's got excellent stalk and root health, and so far we haven't seen any disadvantages when it comes to plant health with this particular hybrid. Last year it turned in some pretty monumental yields. Definitely was an eye catcher and a farmer favorite in every plot where we had it located. So as I said, we haven't found any disadvantages to this one. So for those in northern Ohio and Michigan, this is an excellent choice for an early hybrid. Wellman 2800 is the variety that is next to me right here. Once again, it's got excellent late season health, so if the variety needs to be left standing after maturity, it's going to hang in there with no difficulties at all. We want to have it at least on average to better than average soils. It's got a semi-flex ear. Seeding rate, you'd want to plant probably 31 to 34,000 seeds per acre. It's always given us very consistent yields for a conventional variety. Wellman 2902 is our next variety here in the plot. This variety was new just a couple of years ago, and when we first put it in the plots, it was winning everything. It beat the early season stuff, the late season stuff. The yields were just impressive wherever we put it. It's got a nice flex ear, and the seeding rate on it, we want to be somewhere between 32 and 36,000. It's won lots of plots since we have released it, but the nice thing about it is it flowers early. So that way you're going to spread out your pollination window, so in case we do get hit with a blast of heat or weather that's not so conducive to pollination, this variety hopefully will be out ahead of that and get some real good seed set, and that I think is responsible in some years for its impressive yields. Key 704 is our next Agri-Solution entry here as a conventional variety. As you can see, it's a tall plant. It's got a nice flex ear to it. The seeding rate should be somewhere 29 to 33,000, and you want to be able to harvest this one on time. It's not one that likes to stand out in the field for quite some time after it's mature, because it can develop some stalk issues after it's been ripe and stand there for a while. This particular variety does like to be fed. It needs lots of nitrogen, but it'll reward you with some pretty impressive yields if you keep your nitrogen levels up pretty good. Seeding rate 29 to 33,000, and if you do feed it well through the season, you'll get some pretty impressive yields, and it does work well on all soil types. Wellman 2906 is another hybrid that works well on all soils. It's got a flex ear to it, so that ear length is going to extend if you have some skips in the stand, or if for some reason the crop didn't come up quite as good as what we had hoped. It's got excellent stalk and root strength, so standability and disease issues are not a problem with this particular hybrid. It beats 2807 Double Pro, which is the traded version of this conventional hybrid. So these two are essentially the same genetics. This is conventional, and the 2807, which we'll see down the road here a little bit, is our Double Pro version, but this one here usually is superior to the traded version. And as I said, it works on all soils. It's got excellent leaf health and real strong stalks. So standability and disease tolerance is superb with this variety, and it's got a very, very impressive yield history behind it. So this is definitely a good one for if you're looking for a good mid-season conventional hybrid. This is one you definitely want to put into your lineup. 2708 is another good conventional hybrid. This one likes to be in its maturity zone. It likes to be in an area where it's going to be on the fuller season side. So it works the best up in northern Ohio and going up into Michigan. It works on all soils. It's got an extremely healthy plant, but best of all, it is a very efficient user of nitrogen. So you don't need to have a real high level of nitrogen out there to support a good yield coming from this particular variety. It's got a semi-flex ear, and seeding rate wise, we'd want to drop about 29 to 34,000 depending on your soils, but it's a very versatile hybrid and it can go just about anywhere. Key 908 is our next conventional agri-solutions entry here in the plot today, and as you can see, it's a very, very healthy product. It's got probably one of the better stay green abilities of the hybrids that we have in our test plot, and at harvest time the grain quality is fantastic. The test weight on this hybrid is always on the top end of the scale. It's another one that flowers early for its maturity, and that's a good thing too, because it'll help spread out your pollination window so everything doesn't happen in a short period of time. So it works on all soils, and we'd want to drop or plant about 32 to 36,000 per acre on this particular hybrid, and it will reward you with lots of yield. It's fairly new, it's only a couple years old, and has got an excellent track record since we released it. If I had to pick one hybrid that was extremely dependable and was kind of like every time you can count on it, it would never let you down, it would be Wellman 2310. This variety has a semi-flex ear. You'd plant it somewhere between 29 and 36,000, but the nice thing about this hybrid is if it gets under a lot of stress, some hybrids will blank out and will not set an ear. This variety, regardless of your population or regardless of the environmental stress, it will always set an ear. And it handles stress very, very well. And with its semi-flex ear, it will either make the ear longer or girthier, whatever it needs to do. It works on all soils, and it's extremely tolerant to diseases. As you can see on here, there's just a little bit of northern leaf blight that has infected a few of the leaves, but for the most part, these leaves are pretty well clean this year. It's a very, very dependable hybrid. It's got a fast dry down in the fall, and we've got several farmers that this is the only hybrid they'll plant. So if you had to have one good old standby, this one here is it. Last year we released 2910 as a companion product to 2310. 2310, as I said, goes over pretty well all soils. The 2910 likes to be on average to better than average soils, and it also responds extremely well to high management. So if you've got some fields you want to push to see how far you can push the yield on them, this is definitely one you want to try. You need to feed it with plenty of nitrogen, but you'll be rewarded with lots and lots of bushels. The seeding rate on this one should be somewhere between 30 and 36,000 seeds per acre. And as I said, it likes good dirt, and if you position it properly, you'll be really impressed with the yield that this one will give you at harvest time. 2913 is a 113-day conventional soybean variety. It's got a semi-flex ear, and we'd want to plant it in the ballpark of 29 to 36,000. It's got lots and lots of health, and it will give you real super high test weight corn. So if you harvest your corn and stick it in a bin, you'll be amazed at how many bushels you pull out of that bin once you start hauling the stuff to town. It does like high fertility though, so you have to feed this one to get a good yield response out of it, but it's definitely a good rock solid full season conventional hybrid. Last year we wanted to get something that would compete with the 2913. We needed to have super grain quality like the 2913, but we wanted to try to get to the next yield level, and the 2113 is the hybrid that I think is going to be able to do that. It again works on all soil types. It's not quite as tall as what the 2913 is, but it does have excellent grain quality like the 2913. This is the first year that we've had any of this out in the farmer's hands, and we look for it to continue to grab more acres as we go along, because in what we've seen in the past, this variety has the ability to really kick out some impressive yields. Once again, it's got excellent leaf tolerance for most of of the leaf diseases, and it's got good strong stalks, so standability will never be an issue. And as I said, 29 to 36,000 would be the seeding rate you'd want to use on this one, and it will reward you with lots and lots of bushels at harvest time. With this variety here, we're now going to take a look at our traded corn hybrids that we have in our lineup. The 995 BLG is a Viptera 3220 Easy Refuge product. It's 95 days, and it gives you protection against all the above ground pests. It's got excellent girth and flex on the ear, so your seeding rate should be somewhere around 29 to 36,000. It's a very, very solid hybrid, and going up into Michigan, it's got an amazing yield history, and it's going to give you some real nice, pretty looking seed at harvest time. With that high test weight, they're real nice, good, solid kernels, and it's just a nice hybrid to have as your early hybrid each year. And it's got great protection against above ground pests. This is an experimental variety we're looking at. It's a 100-day maturity, and the big thing about it is it's got super early growth. When it comes out of the ground, it just comes screaming out, and we always need something for some of these early planted fields when it's nice and cold and wet, and most of the products are a little sluggish coming up. We wanted something that would come busting out of the ground, and this one here definitely will do it. It's got excellent drought tolerance, so if it turns off dry for an early hybrid, it's not going to devastate your yield. It's very, very good on leaf diseases, and we're comparing it against the 2903. So if this one can stay in the same ballpark and yield as the 2903, then it'll find a place in our lineup. 2801 is the traded version of Wellman 2800. This has the VT Double Pro trait in it, so that gives you protection against above ground insects. It likes average to slightly than better average soils. It's at a 100-day product, and it gives us very, very consistent yield. It's got super late season plant health for an early hybrid. So the leaves aren't going to cannibalize themselves, the tops aren't going to fall out. You'll have a nice intact plant at harvest time with the 2801. It's a semi-flex ear on it, so you want to have somewhere in the ballpark of 31 to 34,000 seeds per acre at planting time. Our next experimental variety is our experimental 101. It's got a semi-flex ear, and it's got awesome girth. So this particular hybrid has the ability to either make the ear longer or make it girthier, and we've seen it kind of in both scenarios as we've watched it in our preliminary trials. And it does have an extremely high yield for a 101-day product. It's eye-appealing at harvest time. It doesn't fall apart or melt down on us, and we're kind of keeping an eye on this one too to see if it can earn a place in our lineup for another year. On the early side, the Wellman 2903 is the one to beat. When we first released this product a couple years ago, it literally won every single plot we put it in. It was beating hybrids that were 10 days later and much better yield records behind them. This thing here just has the uncanny ability to make lots and lots of corn. Once again, it flowers early for its maturity, and some years that's definitely an advantage in case we get a blast of heat coming in at pollination time. So it helps, by putting this one in your lineup, it'll help spread out your pollination window and hopefully grab some good weather for pollination and initial onset of kernel set. It's had, like I said, very impressive yields. With its flex ear, we'd want to plant 32 to 36,000 plants per acre, and it's really a true plot winner. So it's got a super track record behind it, and it is a very, very popular hybrid, and we sell lots of this particular hybrid. So if you need something to start with in your lineup for a relatively early product, this is definitely a good one to take a look at. Our next experimental is 104 days in maturity, and the thing about this one, and the reason it's in our plot, is because it brings anthracnose resistance and excellent tolerance to Gauss's wilt and tar spot. So when it comes to disease, this one here is a powerhouse. There are very few things that can come in and ravage this particular genetic package. It's got a semi-flex ear. It's all new genetics, and both of the parents are totally unrelated to anything else that we have out here in our lineup. So we're just kind of taking a look at it to see what it's capable of doing, and if it looks like this is the way to go, then we'll be putting more of its sister lines through our trials here in another year. But it does make an exceptionally long flex ear, and it really looks pretty cool as these ears start to drop. They pretty well are, I'd say, half to 2/3 dropped as we look back here, and it looks like the maturity is moving along, and it should be right on target for 104 days. This particular hybrid here, Wellman 2705, loves Michigan. Once we take it across the Ohio line and head north with it, it has given us some very impressive yields. It likes average to slightly better than average soil. It does respond extremely well to nitrogen management, and with this flex ear, we'd plant somewhere around 32 to 36,000 plants per acre. So if you're up in Michigan and you need something kind of in this early to mid-season, 2705 is definitely one with a great track record and a good yield response in your part of the world. We've got two more experimental lines here in our trials. The experimental 106 is a 106-day product, and it's got a nice long flex ear with real deep kernels. So it's not going to make much of a cob. It's going to be a pretty narrow, slender cob. Once again, it likes average to better than average soils. It's super on Gauss's wilt and also gray leaf spot. But in contrast to a couple of these last hybrids we've just had, this one flowers late for its maturity. So once again, it's spreading out that pollination window for you. But even though it flowers late, it will still dry down extremely fast and has pretty good stay green for a hybrid also. So it's a very healthy product, and we'll take a look at it to see how it stacks up with our current hybrids, and if the anthracnose doesn't get to be too bad on this one, because it does not carry the anthracnose resistance like the last hybrid did. If it proves to be a good yielding, very solid hybrid, then possibly in another year you may see it in our lineup. Experimental 107 is our last experimental variety we have in the plot here today. It's got a semi-flex ear, and it has super healthy, heavy test weight. Kind of like a couple of the later varieties that we had earlier. This thing is great on disease pressure. It can handle most of the diseases. Not to say that you're going to have a totally clean leaf, but the diseases will never get the best of this hybrid. It's got good fall stay green ability, and best of all, for a mid-season hybrid, it's also got real good drought tolerance. So once again, another candidate for our lineup, and we'll assess its performance this year and see if it can find a place in our lineup here in another year. Wellman 2307 has been around for a couple of years. The thing that we've discovered on this particular hybrid, that it really doesn't care if it gets planted late. So if for some reason the weather extends our planting season into late May or early June, you usually won't miss a tick when it comes to yield on this particular hybrid. It's good on disease tolerance, has very strong roots, and it's also going to reward you with lots and lots of grain. The flex ear gives this hybrid the ability to go over all soil types, and we'd want to plant somewhere in the ballpark of say 29 to 34,000 plants per acre. At 107 days, Wellman 2807 is probably one of the lead hybrids in our lineup. It's the same genetics as we find in the conventional version 2906, and they both have extremely high top-end yields. They're super on the diseases that affect leaves, primarily Gauss's wilt, gray leaf spot, northern corn leaf blight. This variety has excellent tolerance, and those diseases usually don't bother it at all. The big thing, you don't want to plant it in a real super wet environment. This hybrid does not like wet feet. This section of seed that we used for this plot, as the sign says, was not treated. And we've got a treatment trial now here for the next few entries, and we'll tell you a little bit about what we're looking at as we move forward here. This strip of 2807 is treated with our standard seed treatment in case. So it's got everything on it like you would normally expect to find just buying it from your local seed dealer. Okay, next. On this strip here, we took our standard encased seed treatment, and in addition to that, we put on a product called NutriSmart. Now, NutriSmart contains organisms that will release potash from the soil particle. They will also release phosphorus from the soil particle, which is pretty critical early in the season, and they will also make nitrogen for the plant. So we put these bugs on the seed. This is the first year that we've been able to do this, and we put the bugs on the seed to see what kind of a response we could get. Generally speaking, what we've seen through the growing season is kept the plant healthier, because if these bugs are working the way they're supposed to, this plant should have access to better fertility and also a little extra nitrogen. So we'll check the yield on this one to see what the value the NutriSmart will bring to our seed treatment next year. This one is totally different. What we did with this seed that we used to plant this plot is back in March, we pre-sprouted the seed that we used to plant this plot. We also planted this seed in 3 other locations around Ohio and Michigan. The concept that we were trying to pursue here is if you pre-sprout the seed, it should come up more uniform and faster. And in the 2 plots that we planted before this plot, that was the case. Once they were planted, they rocketed out of the ground. They beat pretty well anything else out of the ground, and they were off to the races and did extremely well. This plot was the last plot that was planted, and it wasn't planted until towards the end of May. And I think there was too much time from the time we pre-sprouted it until we planted it. And if you look down through here, the stand is pretty thin. We probably got in the ballpark of maybe 50% emergence in this pre-sprouted experiment. So we know that if we want to do this again in another year, that we're going to have the pre-sprouting window real close to the planting date. And I think we'll probably get a different hybrid, because we've learned a few things in doing this process. So with the right hybrid selection, I think we can enhance the ability of the hybrid to have a little bit longer shelf life after the pre-sprouting. AgriSolutions 607Q is a 107-day product, and if you're farming different areas that are slower in drainage, or you got to go out there in cold, wet soils, this is the one you want to use. I swear this thing can emerge in standing water. It's got Viptera 3111, which gives you above and below ground protection against insects. The seeding rate that we'd want you to use would be in the ballpark of 32 to 36,000. It'll work on all soil types, but it's got great plant health. So wherever we've gone into an area where a guy says, well, I've got some soils that just don't want to dry out real well in the spring, this is the one that we give him. And very rarely have we ever had an issue where this thing couldn't get us an exceptional stand. So once again, cold, wet soils, key 607Q. The Wellman 2310, as I mentioned earlier in the conventional strip, this is one of our good old, very dependable hybrids. It's got a semi-flex ear, and the seeding rate that we'd want to use would be in the ballpark of 29 to 36,000. It's got great stress tolerance, and as I said on the conventional version, this thing will always set an ear. No matter how hard the environment gets on it, no matter how rough the soil type is, it will always set an ear. And this is one that we would probably call a farmer favorite, because it's just so fail-safe, and it will always give you a real good yield, and in some years it's going to be the highest yielding thing that you've got on your farm just because of its stress tolerance. Wellman 2911 is kind of designed to give the 2310 a little bit of competition. The difference between this one is, rather than going across all soils like the 2310 does, we'd want to keep this one on better than average soils, or at least average soils. It loves high maintenance, and you need to feed it with a pretty good shot of nitrogen, but it's extremely healthy. You'll never have to worry about disease issues or stock issues, as it's always going to come through with a real healthy plant. So if you've got a good area where you kind of want to challenge the field and see what kind of yields you can extract from it, this is definitely one that you want to put in, as it's a good one to win a test plot with. Key 812G is the Roundup Ready or glyphosate version. of our Key 812, and it's a very tall, robust hybrid. It's got low ear placement, and that's one of the reasons we put it in our lineup, was because that low ear placement gives you superior standability. It's got great roots, great stalks, and overall plant health. It's a full season, as I said, robust hybrid, and we use it to take care of the refuge requirement for our 812Q, which is our next hybrid down the line here. The seeding rate on this particular hybrid should be somewhere 28 to 33,000 per acre. 812Q is a GT 3000 hybrid, and that gives you both above ground and below ground protection against insects. It's got a semi-flex ear. Our seeding rate on this should be somewhere 28 to 33,000. Once again, like the 812G, it's a tall, robust plant with great roots, super stalks, and overall wonderful plant health. So these two are kind of the 812G and the 812Q are a 1-2 combination, as the 812G takes care of your refuge requirement and the 812Q will give you your protection against insects. Wellman 2012 is a 112-day hybrid. It works on all soil types like its conventional counterpart. It's got a large flex ear. We'd want to have our seeding rate be in the ballpark of 29 to 36,000, and it's got a very tall, healthy plant. It's great on the leaf diseases. Stalk health is exceptional on this one, and it also is going to give you real good grain quality. The test weight will be up there pretty good for a later season hybrid, and even at some of the moisture levels you can get at harvest time with a full season hybrid, this thing will still come through with some nice high test weight. So if you're looking for a good full season product, this one here definitely is a must-have for your corn lineup. In contrast to our 2012, the 2812, it likes high fertility. You need to put it on good, fertile soil, and it has lots of health to it, so you don't ever have to worry about diseases. It's got a big semi-flex ear, so 29 to 36,000 is a great seeding rate for it. And it loves high fertility. So you got to feed it to get the bushels out of it, but if you do, you'll be amazed at the kind of yield that you can pull down with this particular hybrid. So a good one also to kind of put on some of your better soils. If you want to go after a yield contest or something on the full season side, then this is the one you need to try. Now we're looking at the soybean plot here at our plot down at Tip City, Ohio. This particular variety here is our Wellman 274. We use it primarily for export purposes. It's a high protein early bean, 2.7 in maturity, and it'll go over all soil types. It's got a tremendously impressive yield for an early variety. It's a large seeded soybean, and the protein content is very high. This particular plot was planted on about May the 26th. Today is September the 9th, so you can kind of get a feel for what the maturity looks like and about how far along it would be with those planting dates and current date in mind. Wellman 294 is a variety that is 2.9 maturity. We use it primarily for organic purposes, and the reason being is because this variety can be planted very, very late and still put out some very impressive yields. It's got a high sugar content, which is advantageous to a lot of food manufacturers and fits the organic market very, very well. Wellman 295 is a relatively new soybean variety. It's a conventional variety. It has the RPS1C gene for root rot protection. It'll go on all soil types. It also has cyst nematode protection and has a real high top-end yield. So if you're looking to fill a need in a non-GMO market to get that non-GMO premium, this is very definitely one you want to try. The last plot of Wellman 295s was treated with our encased seed treatment. With the encased seed treatment, we try to put in a balanced fertility, which also includes micronutrients. We'll have beneficial bacteria in there. We use bioaccelerants. We put in essential amino acids to get that plant started off so it doesn't have to make those up front. It can grab them and go and turn it into rapid growth early on in the season. We put a rooting hormone in here that helps the roots get established quickly and elongate even if the soils are a little bit cool. And we put fungicidal materials in here to kind of help beat back the fungus that can sometimes show up on seed that has to lay in the ground for several days if the weather turns against you. And then we also put in an insecticide and then also some biological materials that help support that plant. So we've got a complete, unique seed treatment that we use on all of our corn and soybean varieties, and I don't think you could find the materials that we put in here anywhere else in the marketplace. That's why a lot of times you'll see our products performing very high in the trials. The seed treatment that we use is very impressive. On this particular variety, we started off with our encased seed treatment, and then we added a performance enhancing material that is supposed to aid us in dry weather stress. This is a brand new product. That's the second year we've taken a look at it. It's kind of expensive, so we're trying to find where the fit is and where we can get it so it's always going to pay for itself. So that's what we're looking at with this particular strip here. We're trying to enhance our encased seed treatment and make it just a notch better. On this 295 plot, we started off again with our encased seed treatment, but then we enhanced it with the NutriSmart technology. And the NutriSmart bugs, as I mentioned on the corn strip, is a combination of biological material that will release potash from the soil particle, it will release phosphorus from the soil particle, and there are also some bugs in there that will generate nitrogen for the plant to use. So we put that in combination with the encased seed treatment on this strip to see, number one, if we could improve the protein content of this bean, and then also to see what kind of yield enhancement we could get from it. Our Wellman 315 is a variety that's been around for a few years. The nice thing about this one is if you have to go into a phytophthora environment, this particular variety has two genes for phytophthora protection. It has the RPS1K and the RPS3A gene. So for that reason, it'll work well on all soils. It gets a little bit taller than some of the other varieties do, which allows it to get on the lighter colored soils where height sometimes can be a problem. It's got a real high score on stress tolerance. Stress doesn't seem to bother it too bad. The one watch thing for this particular variety is it generally has small seed. So some guys will tend to overplant it. So you want to watch your seeding rate a little bit with this one, because being a big bushy variety, you can't overdo it and get it a little bit too thick. We're now back to another food grade variety. Wellman 334 is a brand new variety. This is its second year in production with us. It's got limited exception in our overseas market, so we've still got a couple customers who have tried it out. The biggest drawback for some of our customers is that the seed size is a little on the small side. On our earlier varieties that we saw, the 274, for example, is going to run in a ballpark of about 1,800 to 2,000 seeds per pound. This one here will run about 2,400 seeds per pound. So being a little bit smaller, our export customers are kind of a little hesitant or a little leery to go whole hog on it, but they're very impressed with the protein content, as we can get 43 to 45% protein out of this variety. So this one is grown for our export division, which is located over in Van Wert, Ohio. The 384 is another food grade soybean variety, and it by far is the most popular variety. It's got an excellent track record on yield. It's a very tough, hardy variety. Diseases don't seem to bother it hardly at all. And the grain quality coming off of this particular variety is really something. Our export customers come to us and they demand this variety. 44-45% protein is possible with this variety on quite a few years. It works pretty well on every single soil type. We haven't seen any drawback or any soil type where it wouldn't perform and perform well. It's a 3.8 maturity bean and does extremely well, as I said, on all soil types, and has an excellent track record on yield also. On this strip here, we started off with the 384 treated with encase, and then in addition to that, we added the NutriSmart technology. And as we mentioned earlier, that helps release potash and phosphorus from the soil and also helps make nitrogen for the plant. and we're looking for increases of protein, especially in this thing. It would be really cool if we could get another % of protein or two out of this thing. That would put us essentially the highest protein thing on the market. So that's what we're doing with this particular strip here. The 384 in this strip, once again, we started off with our encased seed treatment, but this time we put in a biological fungicide and also a biological growth stimulator. What we're trying to do is get this plant off to a real fast start so it has a longer grain fill period as we get in later on into the growing season. Our export customers, they always like to see us do things as clean and as pure as we possibly can. So that's why we're looking at the biological aspect as opposed to some of the chemical compounds that we use once in a while, and to try to have as clean and pure of an export product as we possibly can. We're now into the area where our traded soybean products are. We're starting off with the 6023E. This is an Enlist E3 variety, and it's a 2.3 maturity soybean. It works on pretty well all soil types. It was the best variety that we could find in the Michigan plots over the last 2 years, and it's got good white mold tolerance, which is pretty important as you go up into Michigan. It also has cyst nematode tolerance. It's excellent on brown stem rot, and it handles stress very well for an early variety. The first entry we have for AgriSolutions in the plot is our Key 1025GL. And this variety is a GT27 variety, which means it's resistant to Liberty. It's also resistant to glyphosate, and it is resistant to the compound Balance. The most popular way that guys have Balance that gets into their soil is that a lot of guys will use Corvus as a corn herbicide. Well, Corvus has a pretty good level of Balance within it, and Balance is very persistent in the market, or in the soil. So over time you can get a buildup of this product, which will suppress your yield. If you go into that environment with a variety like this, which is a GT27, which has tolerance to the Balance herbicide, all of a sudden you'll see your yields start to come back up. So that's the reason we put this particular variety in our lineup for those kinds of situations. It's also very good on SDS tolerance, sudden death. It is probably the best GT27 variety when it comes to sudden death. It goes across all soils and has had a very good yield record so far. Our next variety is Wellman 6125E. It's an Enlist variety, and this 1 here in the numbering system means that the first time this one will be available to the farmer is in 2021. So this is a brand new Enlist E3 variety. The nice thing about it is it's got frog eye resistance, and in some years that can be a major problem. It also has cyst nematode tolerance, and above all, it's got great stress tolerance. And it's a 2.5 maturity bean, so a real good way for a lot of farmers to start off harvest each year as a nice early stress tolerant soybean variety. Our next variety is 5926X. This is a Roundup Ready 2 Extend variety. It works on all soil types, and it's got the RPS 1C and 3A gene. So if you've got some heavier soils with some Phytophthora history behind it, this is a very good option to plant in that environment. It's got an early robust plant, which means this sucker is going to pop right out of the ground and it's going to grow fast. It also has extremely good stress tolerance for an early variety. So if you're looking for an Extend variety, 2.6 maturity that really jumps out of the ground, then this is the one you need to put in your lineup. Back to the Enlist beans, the next one in our plot here is the 6928E. It's a 2.8 maturity bean. This one has the RPS 1K gene for Phytophthora resistance. It's also resistant to brown stem rot. So if you have a history of brown stem rot, that won't bother this particular variety at all. Once again, it's very good on stress, and it loves the soils in northern Ohio and southern Michigan. So that's the place to put this one, and many guys use this for their early soybean varieties as you go north. On this particular plot, we took the 6928Es that were treated with the encased seed treatment, and we added the performance enhancing technology to that particular seed treatment mix. Should give us protection against dry weather issues. So that's what we're looking at on this strip, and we'll compare the two side by side to see if the if the pet product does give us a better yield boost because of some of the dry weather and the heat that we had earlier in the summer. The 5928X is a little bit of a unique Xtend soybean variety. It has the two genes for Phytophthora resistance, has the RPS1C and the RPS3A. A lot of times as we get into the soils, say in west central and then up into northwest Ohio, there are pockets where Phytophthora can really get to be a challenge. This is an excellent variety to put in those kind of environments because it does extremely well in tight soils. It's super stress tolerant, again, as are the other early soybean varieties that we have. It's a 2.8 maturity bean, so it gives guys a chance to get their harvest started in a timely fashion, and it has been doing extremely well on yield for an early variety. 4529 is a Roundup ready to yield variety, so it's a little bit older product in our lineup. It needs well drainage, so we need to put this on lighter, sandier colored soils or areas that are drained extremely well. One of the good things about this variety, it will never green stem. It will always be ripe on a ripe stem, and in some years that can be a major challenge also. It's also great on stress tolerance, so if you keep it away from wet feet, it'll perform really well for you. Wellman 6130, once again, is a brand new variety this year because of the 1 in the number. And the unique thing about this particular variety, it is the most defensive thing we have in our lineup. It is resistant to brown stem rot. It tolerates sudden death extremely well. It's wonderful on white mold, and it's also great when it comes to stress tolerance. So as I said, it's the most defensive variety that we have in our lineup. It'd be interesting to see if all of those traits affect its yieldability or not. In the plots that we looked at it in last year, it was right up there in the top group of varieties. So if you need something to go into really tough conditions, the 6130 is a good one to look at. The next entry for Agri-Solutions is our Key 1031 GL. Once again, it's a GT27 variety, and that gives you tolerance to the Liberty, glyphosate, and then also the Elite herbicide. It's a very highly stress tolerant variety. It's a tall variety, and it possesses the RPS1C gene for Phytophthora protection. This is the latest GT27 variety that we have in our lineup, as some of the fuller season ones, the last couple years we couldn't get good enough performance out of them, so we pretty well dropped those, and this is the latest one that we're now selling of the GT27s. The Wellman 6131 is another new Enlist E3 soybean variety. It works on all soil types. It has very, very strong roots, and it also is probably the best when it comes to brown stem rot tolerance. We had a plot that was over in Indiana last year where brown stem rot really ravaged the plot, and this was the nicest looking variety in that plot. So that's one of the reasons we selected it, just so we have something in the lineup for guys that have that issue. We'll have a brand new product that we can put in there that can help protect you against brown stem rot. Our next entry is the Wellman 5932X. It's a Roundup Ready to Extend variety. Works on all soil types. It's probably the best mid-season Extend variety that I think I've seen. It's got the RPS1C gene for Phytophthora protection. We've never seen it green stem. It's always ripe on a dry stem, and has excellent stress tolerance. Last year, this one, along with the 3.6 Extend varieties, were essentially trading places, being the top or the highest yielding product in our Extend trials. So very good yield history, nice maturity, 3.2, and super track record on yield. Last year, this was one of our more popular Enlist soybean varieties. It's a 3.2 maturity bean. It has the RPS1K gene for Phytophthora. That gives it real strong roots and also a very rugged, taller, growthy plant. Some of the Enlist beans on the earlier side are a little bit shorter. That doesn't mean it affects yield, it's just they're potted a lot closer and they really don't get a lot of height. If farmers are looking for an Enlist bean that gets good height to it, this one here will keep right up with everything else that's out there, as it's got a nice rugged plant type. It's got wonderful 2-year yield average, and I'd say it was the farmer's favorite last year because of the way it ripened and it came off nice and timely and rewarded them with lots of bushels. And once again, it's a 3.2 maturity bean. On this particular entry here, we took the 6032, which is treated with encased seed treatment, and then we added to it a brand new biostimulant along with the encased seed treatment. So the only addition is just one product, and this particular biostimulant was really interesting last year, as wherever we put it in stressed environments from too much water, that those plants fared or made it through the wet conditions much better than a lot of the other things in the strip test. So we're trying this out here to see if it will enhance the yield again this year, and to see if it's a good candidate for helping us to improve our seed treatment here next year. And in an attempt to test the performance enhancing technology on all the different trait packages, we also put that along with our encased seed treatment on the 6032, and to see what kind of benefit we can extract from it for the dry soil conditions. So once again, this would put that product, the performance enhancing material, on every trait package of everything we have, corn and beans. So we'll go across all of the different places where we've tested it to see what the general feel is, if this stuff is able to enhance our yield, especially in times when we get hot, dry weather. The material that we use for treating this strip, we started off with the encased seed treatment, and then we put on a biological fungicide, and then added 2 biological insecticides. So we're trying to see if the 2 insecticides will kind of work together. The things that we're trying to protect the seed against is early seed feeding materials, such like seed corn maggots, for example. In some years those can get to be an issue. We're also looking to protect the plant against nematodes, as especially on some higher ground, those can be a big problem. So that's what we're looking at, to see what kind of performance that we can get out of these. In our seed treatment trials that we have that are replicated and scattered around at various locations, we have already taken soil tests to do the nematode count in the root zone of these different products to see if we actually are making a difference or not. So that's some of the data that we're gathering here this summer, and once we get the combines through to see what kind of yield response we get from these materials, then if they look to be something that is worth it, then we'll start updating our seed treatment, our encased seed treatment, and making it better using these new products. And the last one that we've got here on our seed treatment trial in this plot is the 6032, and we used encased seed treatment and also treated it with the NutriSmart bugs. So once again, we'll have those on all the different traded products that we have also, and all the different trait packages. So this is our way of taking this research out in so we can show farmers some of the things that we're doing. Our next new variety that we have for next year with the Enlist package is Wellman 6133. It's a 3.3 maturity bean, and it's a medium tall, so it's not quite going to be as tall as the 3.2, but it does have the same yieldability. It's got high stress tolerance like the 3.2 does, and also works on all soils. So this one here will be in direct competition with the 3.2, and it gives us 2 different ways of having a product that will work on different soil types. So we'll have the whole breakout on which soils will respond best for certain varieties, and we'll make that available to you in our data that we'll put together here this fall. We're also still producing the Wellman 6033, which was an excellent choice last year at the 3.3 maturity. It works on all soils, extremely consistent yields last year. You could almost determine before you went into the field what it was going to yield last year. It was that consistent and that dependable. It's great on disease tolerance and also has good height, and the old one is just slightly taller than the new 6133 is. So we'll compare these, but we'll have lots of options for farmers in the 3.2, 3.3 maturity range when it comes for selecting your seed for the 2021 growing season. This is our last Roundup Ready 2 soybean variety that we have in our lineup. It's the 4333. It has 2 genes for Phytophthora resistance, and that's why it stayed in our lineup as long as it has. It's got a multi-year average that is almost stunning. It really comes through, especially in areas of high stress. This variety will come through with lots of bushels, and it's like a good old dependable variety. So what we did on this particular plot, this seed here was untreated seed, and then we've got another strip in the back end which had treated seed in it. Where we had untreated seed, we did get some sudden death, and where we had the treated seed, the biological material that we put on the seed treatment was able to keep the nematodes at bay, and we did not have any sudden death in those strips. And we've got another one coming up here where we can demonstrate that. So that's one of the ways that we can tell our seed treatment is working, by the disease reaction of some of the varieties. 5836X is our fuller season Roundup Ready to Yield Extend variety. It works on all soil types. Last year it was the highest yielding Extend product that we had. Probably the best full season Extend variety that's out there. It's got the highest 3-year average of all the Extend beans that we have tested. We've had earlier and later ones that we have tested in the past. It's got the RPS1C gene for Phytophthora protection, and is a good all-around product. In addition to the Extend varieties and the Roundup Ready 2 varieties, we have 3 of the Roundup Ready 2 Extend Flex soybean varieties. We have a 2.5 maturity, we have a 2.8 maturity, and we have a 3.5 maturity. The reason they're not in this plot this year is because at planting time, these were stewarded production, which meant we would have had to go through a lot more of the paperwork to be able to plant them here. And at this point, they're still crop destruct, so we would have to destroy those strips and then clean the combine out in between plots. So rather than to deal with those issues, we have the stewarded production that is happening away from here, and they are in plots where they're in crop destruct plots. The initial plan was to have these varieties approved by the time harvest rolls around, but the EU is still waiting on approval for this particular trait. So they say that it can happen almost any day. Once it does, we will have 3 new varieties that will show up in our lineup that we did not talk about today. 2 more Enlist E3 varieties in our plot. This one here is the 6037. It was brand new last year, and it was our highest yielding Enlist soybean that we had in our plots last year. One nice thing about it is it's good on frog eye leaf spot, and in a lot of areas where this variety would go, frog eye in some years can be a major problem. So that's a welcome trait in a fuller season variety. It also has STS herbicide tolerance. So if you're kind of struggling with weed control and you want to expand your options, this one here you would have the ability of using any STS compound as a material to kind of help beat back some of these harder to kill weeds. It's also a real super good variety on stress, and the standability on it is awesome. It stands like a trooper. So this will probably be the shining star on the later season in our lineup, because it just really looks strong. And we've got other companies that have seen this variety. They're talking about it a lot too. So it's really a very, very well-rounded, strong performing product. As I mentioned earlier, we had a strip here where we had a treated and an untreated strip. This particular strip here of the 6138s was not treated, and you can see in the front that we're suffering from sudden death syndrome. The strip right behind it, which was a border row, that one was treated, and you can see that those are nice and green and still healthy. The big difference is the encased seed treatment. Within the encased seed treatment, we use a biological material called Barnemo, and it is an EPA registered biological nematicide. And it also is a growth stimulator and does extremely well in protecting the soybean from nematodes. The nematodes a lot of times are responsible for feeding on the root system. Once they open up the root system by feeding on it, then the fungus that causes sudden death, which is in the soil, can then enter the plant, and the disease can start causing the plants to die prematurely, and as a result you wind up with lower yield on those particular areas. So a real good visual here. You can tell the difference between our treated and untreated product. This particular variety is our fullest season enlist bean that we have. It's a 3.8 maturity bean. It works on all soils. It's got good height to it, not quite as tall as the 6037, but it's right there. And it's another real good variety for frog eye leaf spot. It had the highest yield in 2019 in our full season trials, along with the 6037. These two kind of flip back and forth as to which one was going to be the highest yield. So that pretty well rounds up our soybean lineup for today, and we hope you've enjoyed the show today.